Two important things. Scale bar, this is half a meter. We're going to be doing a relatively small context, so half a meter is good. If you're doing like a whole square, you'd probably use a full meter. North arrow, which will point north, so if this photo ends up in a publication or something, people looking at it will know what direction we were facing. So, place the north arrow. That's about north.
Hopefully everyone knows that that is our north, just for reference.
Then you want to place the scale bar kind of where it's visible, but not really in the way. Since we're taking a photo of this pottery, probably. So one thing to think about is how this is going to look in the frame. You want the scale bar to be more or less parallel to the lens. So I'll take a picture and then show you guys to demonstrate what I mean. And again, since this is a pretty small context, we'll start out doing it kind of close up so we can actually get a good detail shot. And then we'll also do one of the larger context, so a bit more zoomed out, just to get a sense of what's around it.
And one thing to note
The
is,
shadow?
yes, that's exactly what I
Yeah,
was
so
gonna
the
say.
lighting is not ideal right now, so it would be good to pull that back a bit. This line is pretty ugly.
Yeah.
We would ideally choose a better time of day to do this.
Cloudy day is the best.
Sorry?
Cloudy day is the best for light.
Yeah, cloudy is good.
Cloudy.
As you'll notice, we do most of the. Yeah. It's okay. We don't really.
So for the photogrammetry that we've been doing, we've been doing it early in the morning because the light is a lot less intense, the sun is much lower on the horizon, and you don't get these really intense, stark shadows. When the sun is directly overhead, it's also not too great because you're going to get really bad shadows as well.
Yeah, it filters through the shades in a way that just kind of kills the contrast. Everything looks kind of weird. Colors are all blended together.
Actually, evening light between like 5 and 6 is the best, but we're never really after that. So
Yeah.
we'll stick with this. So while you're just looking through the viewfinder, which obviously none of you can see right now, you want to make sure that the north arrow is nice and visible, nice and straight, that the scale bar is parallel with the bottom of the frame. Obviously that the subject of the photo is completely in the frame. And that's not bad. So I can pass this around real quick. You can see the scale bar is directly parallel with the bottom of the frame. If it was at an angle or skewed, we'd want to take it again. Can everyone see that kind of?
Oh yeah.
Yeah? So that's not bad. The lighting really isn't good, but it's what we've got right now. Then I think I'll hop out and do one a bit further away. Not that different, but you get a bit broader.
It's important that even if you're doing close-up things on single objects, that you also have photos that include greater context. Because an object without its context is just no different from an object sitting in a museum, essentially. So the whole great thing that we have here is its archaeological context. Other things to note, if, for example, Adam were taking a photo of the section, so a vertical surface, he would try his best to have the lens parallel to that. So he wouldn't want to take it from up here at an angle. He would do his best to have it almost directly facing parallel.
So oblique angles in general are not good. You always want to be flush parallel with the subject of the photograph.
Yeah, because there's always lens distortion, no matter what lens you're using, wide or normal, zoomed in or not. There's always distortion, which is why we do photogrammetry, of course, which we'll talk about in the future. The same goes for top-down, and when you'll notice when we do photogrammetry, and Adam gets his big long pole out, he tries his best to keep the lens as parallel to the square as possible, again to reduce the distortion.
So if you imagine a photograph like this in a publication, the people viewing that photograph weren't in the field, so they don't necessarily know what we're looking at. And a slight oblique angle could completely warp, and actually, in your mind, could look like something completely different. So really, you just need it to be completely straight, parallel, and then there's much less chance of kind of just messing with your head.
And if, of course, this were a really important context, which it is not, you'd probably take photos from every angle, etc. Do you want to talk about, while we're talking about photography and have extra time, maybe how we go about preparing for 3D photos in the field?
Yeah, sure. So the JVRP is awesome, as you all know, and we're way ahead with sort of technological advancements of documentation. And one thing that we've gotten quite good at is every nice context, every nice square, when we reach a certain level, that it's nice and clean, and we have a good understanding of what's going on, or not, we do a 3D model of it. So as you guys know, archaeology is completely destructive. And yet, when you can make an accurate 3D model of a square, you're sort of mitigating that destruction virtually, because you can interact with that space after the fact, even when it's gone. So the way that we do that is we have this really crazy software designed by some really smart Russians, and they use a special algorithm that when you take multiple photos of the same thing, the software picks out certain points in each photo that it thinks are the same. So for instance, if I took 40 pictures of this square from a bunch of different angles, there would be certain points like the sherd, the basalt, the bedrock, certain things that the software would be able to pick out in each image and match them up. And once it matches those up, it builds geometry using the photo, which it then fills in with lines, and then combines all of those photos into a texture and kind of drapes it on top of that wireframe and makes a really nice, realistic looking 3D model, which we can then rectify with our grid, so we can tell it certain points using the total station. We can say that corner is these coordinates, that corner is those coordinates, and once the 3D model is oriented using those coordinates, it's spatially accurate. So we can put it into GIS software, which can be used for spatial analysis. We can put it into databases and know where we are related to the site, related to the region, related to the country, and then it provides important historical context for what we're doing here.
In many cases, even just yesterday when I was in Tel Aviv meeting with a colleague discussing this one particular square and some different architectural phases, we pulled up one of the 3D models from last season at Megiddo, and it was entirely helpful. If we were to go back to site right now, for a start, some of those elements have already been removed, and they've also suffered a winter of rain that's eroded the sections, etc. But in a way, we can step right back into that square on the day that that was done. And basically, the way that we do it in the field, it only takes a few minutes. You would start with the camera from here and just take photo, 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 etc. all the way around. Maybe some from a little bit higher, some from a little bit lower, and then you can go into the square and take a few detail shots of the sections straight on, etc. And that's all it takes. And the software really does the rest.
Yeah. And so an interesting example of how useful analytically this can actually be is somebody did an experiment where they handed 3 archaeologists basically a packet of documentation for a context. And they said, okay, give me a quick interpretation of what you think is going on. They didn't know the context. So this was just using paper documentation, a few photographs, like the basic, or like normal stuff. And they provided their analysis, their interpretation, handed it back, like, okay, this seems more or less right. Then she handed them a 3D model of the same context and nothing else, and said, okay, now give me your interpretation. And all 3 of them, each one of them changed their interpretations based on just seeing the reality of the situation. So narratives, documentation, all of that is super important, but when you really have a realistic perspective on what we did in the field, it actually can change your interpretation. So this isn't just cool, fun, shiny technology. It actually is useful for analysis of the archaeology.
Seems to be the ability to go
back in time is the most valuable aspect for these other advances or the discoveries later on that might have lead to yours. It's amazing how much you lost before you had that technology.
Yeah. Yeah, any questions?
To the 3D modeling, when you go around the square, does distance matter quite a bit, or will it pick up?
The software is like insanely smart. I don't know how they did it, but you can zoom in, you can do different angles, different zooms, different distances, and it can still pick out those similar points. And actually, the more variation you have in angles, the better the model will turn out because it has more perspectives to work with. Anything else?
Thanks, Adam. And back to work, everyone.